There are days when rain does you a kindness. It gives your grief something to hide behind. I was standing at the end of the dock, watching the rain darken the surface of Lake Muskoka, when my phone buzzed in my jacket pocket for the third time in 20 minutes. Behind me, the cottage glowed softly through the wet gray afternoon. The memorial had ended, but a few people were still inside, speaking in low voices, rinsing cups, stacking plates, doing the quiet work people do when there is nothing left to say, but no one is ready to leave. Elaine's memorial. 8 people. 8 people had come to remember a woman who had spent her whole life showing up for everyone else. The McLeans from next door, old George from the marina, Father Doyle from St. Andrews, Karen, the nurse who had cared for Elaine the last 7 months, my younger brother Peter, who had driven up from Kingston in a storm, Ruth and Ben Ellery, who had known us since the kids were little, and me, 8 people. Not counting the 2 who mattered most and were nowhere to be seen. The rain had soaked through my suit shoulders, but I stayed where I was. I could not go back inside yet. I could not sit in that living room and look at the framed photograph on the mantel, the one of Elaine laughing on this same dock 3 summers earlier, wearing a red windbreaker and that impossible expression she always had when she was happy, as if joy were something she had stumbled into by accident and was delighted to find still there. ALS took everything from her except her eyes. That was the cruelest part. Her body failed in pieces. Her voice blurred. Her hands stopped obeying her. Her legs quit. Her swallowing. Her breathing. But her eyes stayed sharp and awake right until the end. They could still tell me when she was in pain, when she was tired, when she was scared, and somehow, even when she was all of those things at once, they could still tell me she loved me. I pulled the phone from my pocket and looked down. Not who I wanted. Just another automated message from the funeral home confirming the burial arrangements for the next morning. I scrolled up out of habit, back through the conversation thread I had checked every hour for 3 straight days. Andrew. Last message. 6 days ago. Sorry, Dad. Board review this week. No way I can get out of Toronto. Melissa. Last message. 5 days ago. Chloe has regionals and Carter's got that soccer showcase. You know how it is. I'll come once things settle. 3 days earlier, I had sent the same message to both of them. Your mother passed peacefully this morning at 6:12. Memorial Friday at 3 p.m. at the Cottage. Andrew responded 7 hours later. So sorry, Dad. This is awful. I'll try to make it next week. Melissa answered close to midnight. Dad, I'm sorry. I know this is hard for you. We'll come soon. For you. Not for us. Not for their mother. For me. As if Elaine had been something adjacent to them. A tragedy in the background of their own schedules. Graham? Karen's voice came from behind me. Soft. Careful. I turned. She stood at the top of the dock ramp under a borrowed umbrella, her navy raincoat zipped to the chin, concern plain on her face. Good woman, Karen. Strong without making a performance of it. She had seen every ugly detail of the last stretch and never once looked away. You should come in, she said. You're drenched. In a minute. She hesitated. I put the extra sandwiches away. Ruth wrapped the lemon squares, and George left that smoked trout spread in the fridge. I nodded. Thank you. She stepped a little closer, umbrella tilting against the wind. Your children, they still aren't coming? There it was. The question everyone else had politely avoided all afternoon. I shook my head. Karen's mouth tightened, not in surprise, in recognition. She had been there too long to be surprised by anything involving them. I see, she said. That was all. No false comfort, no defense on their behalf. She had watched Elaine's decline from the inside. She knew exactly how often the children had visited. 3 times in nearly 2 years. Andrew came once the previous Thanksgiving. He stayed 4 hours, spent half of them on conference calls from the porch because some acquisition was at a critical point. Melissa came in April with the kids. That visit lasted just under 3 hours. Chloe complained there was no Wi-Fi on the dock. Carter got mud on his sneakers and wanted to leave. Melissa kept checking her watch. Elaine cried after they left. She could no longer speak by then, but I knew exactly what the tears meant. I walked back with Karen toward the cottage. Inside, Father Doyle was standing near the fireplace saying something kind about Elaine's steadiness. The McLeans nodded. George kept dabbing at his face with a folded napkin. Peter looked at me from across the room with that specific brother's expression that means you are not fooling anyone, but I will let you pretend. By 5:30, the room had emptied. Karen hugged me. Ruth pressed 2 containers of food into my hands I did not want, but would later be grateful for. Father Doyle promised to call next week. George squeezed my shoulder so hard it hurt. Peter stayed to help me wash dishes and gather up plates. "You want me to stay the night?" he asked when the kitchen was finally quiet. "No, Susan's waiting for you. Go home." He looked at me. "Graham, I'll be all right." "No," he said. "You won't. Not tonight. But you will be eventually." I leaned against the counter and looked out the dark window over the lake. "That's about as hopeful as I can manage." He came over and hugged me hard. We had never been an especially demonstrative family, but death rearranges those rules. "Call me for anything," he said. "And I mean anything. Don't do that big brother nonsense where you decide suffering privately is a personality trait." I laughed once against my will. "Drive safe." After he left, the cottage went utterly still. Elaine's hospital bed was still set up in the corner of the living room facing the windows. We had moved it there in August so she could watch the lake, so she could see sunrise, so she could still feel, even at the end, that she was where she loved to be. I knew I should call the equipment company Monday. I also knew I would not. I sat in her chair instead. On the side table was the envelope Martin Lowe had given me 2 weeks earlier. Martin had been our lawyer for nearly 18 years. Elaine had typed a message to him using her eye-gaze computer while she still had enough energy to do it. For Graham, after the memorial. Not before. I had promised. Now, the memorial was over. I opened the envelope. Inside was a letter in Elaine's old handwriting, the handwriting from before the disease, steady and slightly slanted, dated 16 months earlier. "My darling Graham, if you are reading this, then I am where I have been heading for a long time, and you are where I never wanted to leave you. I hope the memorial was small and beautiful. I hope someone remembered the lemon cake. I hope you wore the navy tie I like better than the gray one, even though you think the gray one makes you look distinguished. It does not. It makes you look like you sell insurance." I smiled in spite of myself, then wiped my face with the heel of my hand and kept reading. "By now you know Andrew and Melissa were not there. I am sorry. I am sorrier than I can say. But I need you to understand that I expected it. I have spent the last year watching them step back one polite excuse at a time. The calls shortened. The visits vanished. When they did speak to me, their questions were strange. Not loving strange. Administrative strange. How is the market up here now? Have you and Dad updated the will? Is the cottage still in both names? What happens with the insurance? At first, I told myself I was being cruel to think ill of my own children. Then Andrew asked me directly whether probate would be complicated if the cottage was still considered family property. Melissa asked whether the insurance paid quickly. "They are waiting, Graham. Not for one more afternoon with me. Not for a goodbye. For paperwork." I had to stop reading then because my hands had started to shake. I set the letter down, stood, walked to the sink, ran cold water over both wrists, came back, and sat down again. Elaine continued. "So I did something about it. Do you remember when I insisted 3 years ago that we go see Martin right after the diagnosis? You thought I was being gloomy. I was being prepared. Everything is handled. Everything important is protected. Martin has the documents and he will explain them tomorrow. But I need one promise from you, my love. When they come in the morning, because they will come in the morning, do not let them make you feel cruel for accepting what I chose. You gave them every chance to remain my children in deed, not only in blood. They made their choice. You are the one who learned the suction machine. You are the one who fed me when my hands stopped working. You are the one who slept in that ridiculous recliner because you said you wanted to be there in case I woke up afraid. You are the one who read to me when I could no longer hold the pages. You are the one who kept telling me I was beautiful when my body had become a battlefield. Do not apologize for being loved correctly. The code to the safe is September 9th. There is something in it for you. Always yours, Elaine. I sat there with the letter in my lap for a long time. Then I stood, went into the bedroom, and opened the closet. The safe was behind her winter coats, the ones she had not worn in 2 seasons, but that still smelled faintly of cedar and her perfume. September 9th, our anniversary. The lock clicked. Inside were 2 envelopes and a USB drive. One envelope was marked for Martin, if necessary. The other items were for me. I took the USB to the kitchen table, opened my laptop, plugged it in, and found one file, Elaine_for_Graham.mp4. The video opened on our living room. Elaine sat in her wheelchair by the front window in a pale blue sweater. This had been before the feeding tube, before the neck brace. She could still speak then, though every word cost effort. "Hi, love," she said to the camera. Her voice. God. I had not heard her actual voice in so long that for a second my whole body forgot how to move. "If you're watching this," she said, smiling that small, brave smile of hers, "then I didn't manage to outlive the predictions after all, which honestly feels a little rude on my part." I laughed and cried at the same time. "I need to explain what I've done," she went on. "About a year and a half ago, I started noticing the pattern with the children. They weren't asking about me. They were asking around me. Andrew wanted to know how title worked on inherited lake property. Melissa asked whether life insurance bypassed probate. They thought they were being subtle. They were not." Elaine shifted in the chair and winced slightly. I remembered that sweater. I remembered buttoning it for her because her fingers had already begun to fail. "So," she said, "I called Martin and I got practical. The cottage, our cottage, is in your name now, entirely. I transferred my interest 14 months ago, registered, final, legal. The insurance policy is payable only to you. $300,000, directly to you, no split. All our investment accounts and savings remain joint with right of survivorship. They pass to you automatically. No court, no waiting, no nonsense." She paused to catch her breath, then continued. "I also created education trusts for Chloe and Carter. $30,000 each. They receive it at 25 or for tuition before then if they need it. Not their parents. Them." Then she looked directly into the camera. "Andrew and Melissa receive nothing." The words landed in me like a dropped stone. "Not because I stopped loving them," she said. "I didn't. Mothers rarely get that luxury. But love is not the same thing as reward. Love is not an excuse to ignore behavior. They abandoned us, Graham. They abandoned me when I was dying, yes. But worse, they abandoned you while you were keeping me alive. And that I cannot forgive with money." She took another breath. "So I chose you. I chose the man who meant every word of in sickness and in health. I chose the husband who bathed me when I couldn't stand, who memorized medication times, who held the cup to my mouth, who sat by my bed at 2 in the morning pretending not to cry. I chose the person who was still here." There were tears on my face again. I did not bother wiping them this time. "If they tell you that you manipulated me," she said, "tell them I was smarter than all of you even before I got sick, and illness did not improve their odds." That was so Elaine, I laughed out loud. Martin has everything. Trust him. Trust me. Do not let guilt undo what I did with a clear mind and a very determined pen. Then softer. You have earned peace, my love. Please take it. The video ended. I sat in the dark kitchen until the laptop screen dimmed and the room reflected back at me in the glass. Then I went to bed in the room that still smelled like her hair oil and hand cream and did not sleep at all. At 7:18 the next morning, I heard tires on gravel, then another engine. I got up, crossed to the window, and looked down at the driveway. Andrew's dark Audi, Melissa's white SUV. There they were. He got out in a camel overcoat over a suit, phone already in hand. She stepped out in expensive athleisure and sunglasses despite the clouds, holding a travel mug the size of a flower vase. They stood in the driveway talking before either came to the door, glancing at the cottage, at the lake, at the detached boathouse, assessing, strategizing. I went downstairs and put coffee on. Elaine had been right. At exactly 7:30, the doorbell rang. I opened the door. "Dad," Melissa said first, already leaning in for a hug that smelled like expensive shampoo and urgency. "Oh my God, I'm so sorry we missed yesterday. The highway was impossible and then Chloe's event ran over and—" Andrew stepped past her. "Sorry, Dad. It's been insane. I came as soon as I could." Neither of them looked at me long enough to see that I had not invited them inside. Eventually, I moved aside. They entered. Andrew's eyes went straight to the hospital bed in the living room and then away just as quickly. Melissa looked at it and actually flinched. I would have respected that if anything else about her being there had felt real. "You still have this here," she said. "It's been less than a day." Right. Of course. I poured coffee for all three of us because I was raised well and because I wanted my hands occupied. We sat at the kitchen table, the same table where Andrew had once built a cardboard volcano for 7th grade science. The same table where Melissa cried over algebra and Elaine made grilled cheese and told her mathematics was not a moral referendum. The same table where we had spent Christmas mornings, paid bills, celebrated report cards, argued about curfews, and once, memorably, carved pumpkins until the dog threw up seeds on the rug. Now my children sat across from me like clients at an unpleasant consultation. Melissa looked around. "It feels so strange here." I said nothing. Andrew wrapped both hands around his mug. "Have you thought about what happens next?" "What do you mean?" "With the property, the estate, practical things." There it was, not even 10 minutes in. "Everything is already handled," I said. Melissa frowned. "Handled how?" "Your mother handled it." Andrew leaned back. "Dad, there still has to be a process. The will, probate, asset distribution. Not if there's nothing passing through the estate." The room shifted. Melissa lowered her cup. "What does that mean?" "It means the accounts were joint. They passed to me automatically. It means the insurance names me as sole beneficiary. It means there is nothing for probate to administer on that front." Andrew went very still. "And the cottage?" he asked. "The cottage is mine." His expression changed. Fast. "No. Mom inherited half from Nana. That was separate." It was, until she transferred her interest to me 14 months ago. Melissa actually laughed, a short, unbelieving sound. "That's impossible." "It's registered with the province. Martin handled it." Andrew's voice sharpened. "You had her sign over the cottage while she was terminally ill?" I looked at him for a long moment. "Be very careful what you accuse me of in this kitchen." He looked away first. Melissa said, "Mom would never do that. She would never leave us nothing." "Then you did not know your mother very well by the end." Her eyes filled instantly, but not with grief, with offense. "We are her children." "Yes," I said. "And where were you?" Silence. Melissa straightened. "That is not fair." "Fair?" I heard my own voice harden. "Your mother died after 2 years of needing more help every month. You came 3 times between you. 3 times. Andrew, you spent Thanksgiving taking calls on the porch while your mother could barely lift her head. Melissa, you left after 2.5 hours because Carter was bored. We had lives, she snapped. So did I. Andrew cut in. Dad, this is emotional. We're all upset. Let's not say things we can't take back. I laughed at that. Quietly. Without humor. You are sitting in the cottage your mother loved most in the world, less than 24 hours after her memorial, and trying to discuss liquidation strategy. Tell me more about emotional restraint. Melissa's lips parted. Andrew pulled out his phone and set it on the table like he was preparing evidence. We'll need to speak to counsel, he said. You should. He stared at me. You're serious. Entirely. Melissa's voice went thin. She actually cut us out. She chose to provide for the person who cared for her. By turning her back on her own children? No, I said, by finally facing who her children had become. That landed. Andrew stood up so abruptly his chair scraped backward. This is insane. She wasn't well. She was vulnerable. You were with her all day, every day. Of course you had influence. Yes, I had influence. I influenced her by showing up, by washing her hair, by changing sheets, by learning how to manage the suction machine when she choked, by sleeping in a recliner beside her bed for 7 months. That kind of influence. Melissa started crying then. Real tears this time, though what fed them I could not say. We would have come if we'd known it was that bad. I looked at her. I told you in September that if you wanted more time, you needed to come. I told you in October she was declining quickly. I called the day before she died. You said Chloe had a tournament. Melissa covered her face with one hand. Andrew was already tapping at his phone. I'm calling a lawyer. You do that, I said. But before you spend money, you should know your mother left documentation, letters, video, text messages, call logs, notes. She knew you would challenge this. Andrew froze. Melissa looked up. What are you talking about? She saw exactly what was happening. She prepared for it. That's ridiculous, Andrew said too fast. No. What's ridiculous is that she understood your motives more clearly from a wheelchair than you understand your own standing in front of me. He slammed his palm flat on the table. You are talking about our mother like she was building a case against us. She was protecting her husband. The room went silent. Then I said the words I had been holding since before dawn. Get out. Melissa blinked. Dad, get out. Andrew stood rigid, jaw tight. This isn't over. I know. But this conversation is. They hesitated a beat too long, maybe waiting for me to soften, to call them back, to remember I was their father, and fathers are supposed to keep doors open no matter what walks through them. I did not. They left. I watched from the window as they stood in the driveway under the dripping pines, arguing, pointing, calling people. Then both vehicles backed out and disappeared down the lane. I sat back down at the kitchen table and lowered my head into both hands. Not because I had sent them away, because Elaine had been right about everything. At 9:15, the bell rang again. This time it was Martin. He stood on the porch in a dark overcoat holding a briefcase and 2 file boxes. I thought I'd save us both some time, he said when I opened the door. You knew they'd come this morning. He stepped inside and set the boxes on the table. Elaine said they would be here within 12 hours. She was very specific. He took one look at my face. That bad? Worse. He gave me a moment, then opened the briefcase. There are a few things you should see now rather than later. What he laid out on my kitchen table looked less like estate planning and more like a prosecution file. Chronologies, printouts of texts, dates of canceled visits, notes from medical appointments they skipped, copies of emails, a formal physician evaluation attesting to Elaine's full cognitive capacity on the day every document was signed, witness affidavits, recording transcripts. She started organizing this around 17 months ago, Martin said, once she realized the pattern wasn't incidental. I turned pages with numb fingers. She was meticulous. She was angry, he said quietly. Not often, but precisely. He handed me another document. This is her video will, executed here in the office with 2 witnesses present and notarized. It is extremely difficult to challenge. I don't want to watch it. You may not have to. But you should know what exists. He opened another folder. There's more. Elaine wrote a declaration to be entered into the file if either child contested the distribution. If they proceed, I will submit it. Read it, I said. Martin adjusted his glasses and began. I, Elaine Margaret Ellis, being of sound mind and acting of my own free will, make the following statement regarding my decision to leave the entirety of my estate outside modest educational trusts for my grandchildren to my husband, Graham Ellis. This decision is not the product of coercion, confusion, illness-induced delusion, or manipulation. It is the product of observation. For the 22 months following my diagnosis, my children, Andrew Ellis and Melissa Carter, visited me a combined total of 3 times. They attended 1 family dinner out of 19 invitations. Their average call duration during the final year of my illness was 6 minutes. During that same period, my husband performed nearly all my daily care. He bathed me, fed me, lifted me, read to me, managed my medical equipment, slept beside my bed, cared for me with tenderness, patience, and dignity after my children had effectively withdrawn from my life. I do not disinherit my children because I do not love them. I disinherit them because I refuse to confuse biology with devotion. My husband gave up comfort, rest, privacy, and ease to care for me until my final breath. He has earned security. He has earned this home. He has earned peace. If my children contest this arrangement, let the record reflect that they do so despite being fully aware of the reasons for my decision and despite having had abundant opportunity to act differently while I was still alive. I read every word over Martin's shoulder as he spoke them. By the end, I was crying again, not violently, just quietly, the tears falling one after another onto the backs of my hands. She made this bulletproof, Martin said gently. They can file whatever they like. They will lose. Will they try? Yes. And he was right. 3 weeks later, a formal notice arrived from Andrew's counsel alleging diminished capacity, undue influence, and impropriety in the Cottage transfer. Martin called me before I could panic. We expected this, he said. Don't do anything. Don't answer them. That's what I'm for. The next 6 months were a blur of legal language and old pain pulled into fluorescent rooms. Andrew and Melissa claimed Elaine had been cognitively compromised, claimed I had isolated her, claimed she would never willingly have excluded them. Martin responded with everything: the physician's assessment, the video will, the land transfer records, Karen's testimony about Elaine's lucidity and about my daily care, statements from the McLeans and George, phone logs, text messages. Emails where Melissa apologized for another missed weekend and Andrew wrote, "Can't do the trip, quarter end is nuts, give mom my love." Even Father Doyle provided a statement that Elaine had discussed her intentions clearly and repeatedly. The hearing itself lasted less than a day. The judge, an older woman with absolutely no appetite for adult children pretending neglect was logistics, reviewed the file, watched portions of the video, and shut the whole thing down with a decisiveness that felt almost holy. The deceased made her wishes abundantly clear, she said. The evidence before the court demonstrates full capacity, thoughtful intent, and substantial grounds for the disposition she chose. There is no basis for this challenge. Then she ordered Andrew and Melissa to pay costs. They appealed. They lost again. After that, the silence from them became complete. For a while, I thought that might be the whole ending. Loss, paperwork, quiet. But life, even damaged life, is rarely that neat. About 4 months after the final appeal failed, I got an email from Chloe. She was 17 then, thinking about university, writing from an address that still had too many numbers in it because she was young and had not yet learned the dignity of a proper email signature. Grandpa, I know Mom and you aren't talking. I don't want to upset anyone, but I'd really like to hear stories about Grandma if that's okay. I sat staring at the screen for so long my coffee went cold. Then I wrote back immediately. We talked on the phone that Sunday for nearly 2 hours. I told her about Elaine as a girl, about how she used to cheat at Scrabble by inventing words that sounded plausible, about how she laughed too loudly in restaurants, about how she once made an entire school production of The Tempest happen with no budget and one functioning spotlight because the drama teacher quit. Chloe cried a little. So did I. 3 weeks later, Carter sent me a photo of a sketch he had made of the cottage from memory and asked if I still had the red canoe. I wrote him back too. By the next summer, both grandkids came for a week, separately and then together. We fished, we made pancakes, we sat on the dock and watched the loons. Chloe asked if the trust Grandma created was real because her mother had called it a manipulative legal stunt. I told her yes, it was real, and also that her grandmother loved precision almost as much as she loved books. I am 69 now. It has been 2 years since Elaine died. The cottage is paid off. The insurance money sits where Martin told me to put it, boring and safe and generating exactly the kind of quiet security Elaine wanted for me. I have enough. More than enough. Enough not to worry. Enough to stay where she wanted me to stay. Some mornings I still wake up and reach for her before my brain catches up with the fact that I live alone. Some afternoons, a woman in the grocery store will laugh in a way that sounds almost like her, and I will have to stand very still beside the avocados until the world settles again. Not long ago, I saw a middle-aged man helping his frail mother into a pharmacy, patient as weather, one hand under her elbow, carrying her purse in the other. I had to sit in my truck afterward and cry. Not because I envied him, because I realized Andrew and Melissa had missed the deepest part of being human and perhaps did not even know it. Showing up for someone at the end is not a burden. It is an honor. It strips life down to what matters and asks whether you mean the love you claim to feel. Elaine knew that. She also knew that protection is one of love's highest forms. People who hear the story sometimes say, carefully, it must have been hard for her to cut out her own children. That is not how I think of it. Elaine did not cut them out. She accepted them as they had chosen to be and refused to let that choice become my punishment. There is a difference. Some evenings, if the weather holds, I take my coffee down to the dock and sit exactly where she used to sit wrapped in a blanket, knees tucked up, watching the light change over the water. I talk to her sometimes, not because I think the lake carries messages anywhere in particular, just because after 35 years of marriage, silence with her still feels unnatural. I tell her Chloe got into McGill. I tell her Carter is taller than I am now and somehow still terrified of dragonflies. I tell her the boathouse roof needs work again. I tell her I finally donated the hospital bed but kept the blue sweater from the video. And every now and then, when the morning is especially still and the water is flat as polished metal, I lift my mug toward the lake and say, thank you. For the years. For the courage. For the way she loved me before death and somehow after it too. The lake never answers. It does not have to. The cottage remains. The coffee stays hot. The air moves through the pines. Somewhere in all that quiet is the shape of the life we made together, still holding. And in that, more days than not now, I am all right.